Have you ever wondered how art can just completely change its DNA in a single century? Well, that's pretty much what happened in the 1300s. We saw art go from these colossal, kind of rigid structures to works of just incredible delicacy and grace. The big question, of course, is how did that happen? The key that unlocks this whole story, it really boils down to one simple question. What happens when the biggest customer for art completely changes? And as we're about to see, the answer is, well, pretty much everything. So the story really kicks off with who was paying for all this art. For centuries, the church was, the undisputed heavyweight champion of art patronage. But in the 14th century, things started to shift. Power and wealth began to spread out, and a whole new class of patrons stepped onto the scene. So who were these new players on the block? Well, think of wealthy merchants, powerful nobles, and those influential citizens, the burghers, in Europe's booming cities. They had new money, for sure, but they also had refined tastes and this powerful desire to show off their status. They wanted to see their own lives and their values reflected in the art they were buying. And this created a total clash of artistic goals. The church's main aim was monumental public worship. Think massive, awe-inspiring cathedrals designed to make you feel small. But these new patrons? They were after art for refined, private enjoyment. And that meant the entire scale and style of art had to change, from being grand and rigid to something much more dainty and graceful. Okay, so new patrons, new tastes. That makes sense. But let's take a closer look at how this new obsession with grace and detail actually started to physically change the art itself, starting with architecture. In architecture, this new preference gave birth to something we now call the decorated style. And really, the name says it all. The focus wasn't just on building bigger or taller anymore. Now it was all about the intricate details, these elaborate patterns, and this almost unbelievable lacework carved right into the stone. To get a picture of this in your head, stop thinking about giant, imposing walls. Instead, imagine delicate, web-like ornamentation just covering a building's surface. The front of Exeter Cathedral is a perfect example of this. It's an absolute feast of detailed craftsmanship. Just gorgeous. And this love for elegance completely shook up the world of sculpture, too. Artists started to ditch those stiff, pillar-like figures of the past and really embrace what's known as the S-curve. It's this pose where the body just gently sways, which creates this natural sense of movement and an unmistakable feeling of grace. You can see the revolution right here. It's a total transformation. Figures were no longer just rigid symbols. They became radiant, dynamic beings, absolutely full of life and elegance. And this wasn't just a new pose. It was a whole new way of looking at humanity itself. All right, so this desire for refinement and pattern also swept through the world of painting and illuminated manuscripts. But here, it took a really fascinating new twist. A really key figure here is the Italian painter Simone Martini. He basically created this breakthrough style by mixing together three different elements. It's like a recipe. First, he started with the traditional Byzantine forms everyone knew. Then, he added in that revolutionary sense of space and depth that Giotto had just pioneered. And for the final touch, he wove in that Northern European Gothic love for flowing lines and beautiful patterns. The result of this fusion was something completely new, and it wasn't just about style. A new artistic ambition started to bubble up across Europe. Artists weren't satisfied with just repeating old formulas anymore. They wanted to merge the sacred and the secular, to bring detailed observations from the real world right into their religious stories. The Limburg brothers were basically the superstars of this trend. In their absolutely breathtaking manuscript miniatures, they would pack the backgrounds with these incredibly realistic details of 14th century life. So you'd see people hunting, peasants working the fields, nobles just enjoying courtly life. The sacred and the everyday were suddenly living together on the very same page. Now, as artists and their wealthy patrons traveled around and exchanged ideas, all these regional trends that were popping up in Italy, France, and elsewhere, they started to merge, and what came out of it was a truly continent-wide phenomenon. This became known as the international style. It wasn't tied to any one country. It was a unified aesthetic that just swept across Europe. And the key ingredients? Well, it was a shared passion for delicate details, elegant, flowing lines, and rich, beautiful patterns. I mean, think about what this really means. For a time, an artist from Prague and an artist from Paris were, for all intents and purposes, speaking the exact same visual language. It was this shared vocabulary of elegance that went right over borders. Pretty amazing. So all of these changes in who was buying art, what the art looked like, the subject matter, it all led to the most profound shift of all, a complete reimagining of what it even meant to be an artist. This basically rewrote the artist's job description. They went from being seen as a skilled craftsman who was valued for mastering old formulas to being an active observer who was valued for their unique insight. The goal wasn't just technical skill anymore, it was about the ability to truly see the world and capture it. And this new vision of the artist as an observer, as a student of nature and of light, that was the final critical piece of the puzzle. It laid all the groundwork and directly set the stage for that explosion of creativity that we now call the Renaissance. Honestly, without this shift, the incredible leap that came next would have been impossible.
So, the pieces were all in place. You have a new focus on observation, a new kind of patronage, and a new status for the artist. But that leaves us with one final, really tantalizing question. How did they take that next giant leap and finally, conquer reality? Well, that's the story for another time.